If you want to predict how long somebody will live, then forget their cholesterol, forget their weight, look instead at their muscle. Because muscle mass and strength are two of the strongest predictors of longevity that we have in medicine. Hi, I'm Dr. Alex. I'm an emergency medicine doctor. And after nearly 10 years in the AAND, I've seen what happens when preventable disease isn't prevented. And so my goal now is to help people avoid it in the first place and live longer, healthier lives. What I've realized over thousands and thousands of shifts is that patients who stay independent, who avoid disability, who recover quickly from illness, they all share one thing: they're strong. Not necessarily gym strong, but functionally strong. They have muscle. And the patients who deteriorate the fastest, who lose their independence, who end up in nursing homes after a single fall, they've lost their muscle years before they lost their health. So this video breaks down exactly why that happens. We're going to explore how low muscle mass raises your risk of early death, why muscle is your primary tool for controlling your blood sugar, why it protects your brain and your heart, why it stops the falls that kill people in their 70s and 80s, and most importantly, how to build protective muscle at any age, even if you've never trained before. So, just a quick one before we carry on with the rest of the video. So, I see messages and comments from people all the time who've watched a few videos and didn't realize that they weren't actually subscribed. So could you do me a quick favor and just double check that you are? It's free. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this and keep the whole thing moving in the right direction and helping more people like you. And if you are subscribed, then thank you. You're not just watching, you're part of this story, and I really appreciate you being on the journey with me. To understand why muscle matters so much later in life, we need to first look at when muscle loss actually begins. Because for most people, it starts far earlier than they expect. After your mid-30s, you lose between 1 and 3% of your muscle mass every year if you do nothing to maintain it. Now, that might not sound like much, but over decades, it compounds dramatically. By the time you reach your 70s, you could have lost 40 to 50% of your total muscle mass. Now, this isn't just about feeling weaker or struggling to open jars. This is what we call sarcopenia, and it's an independent risk factor for death. What that means in practical terms is that sarcopenia increases your mortality risk by anywhere from 2 to 5 times depending on which study you look at. This isn't because muscle loss causes one specific disease. It's because low muscle mass makes you vulnerable to almost everything: infections, falls, metabolic disease, cardiovascular events. Your body becomes less resilient. Muscle is like your body's pension. The earlier you invest and the more consistently you top it up, the more health you can withdraw from it later. Most people don't think about this in their 30s and 40s when they feel fine, but the choices you make in those decades directly determine how independent you'll be in your 70s and 80s. Now, the good news is that unlike many aspects of aging, muscle loss is largely reversible. You can rebuild strength at any age with the right stimulus. So once you understand how early muscle loss begins, the next question is why that loss causes so much damage. And one of the biggest answers lies in your blood sugar control. Muscle is your main tool for controlling blood sugar, and most people have no idea how critical this relationship is. When you eat carbohydrates, your blood glucose rises. We know that. And your body needs somewhere to store that glucose. Around 70 to 80% of the glucose from your bloodstream is absorbed directly by your muscle tissue. Now think about what happens when you have low muscle mass. You have fewer muscle cells, which means fewer glucose receptors, which means less capacity to absorb glucose from your blood. Your pancreas sees elevated blood sugar and pumps out more insulin to try and force that glucose into cells. Over time, this creates insulin resistance. Your cells literally stop responding to insulin effectively, and you develop type 2 diabetes. Think of muscle as a giant sponge. A big sponge soaks up glucose easily. A small sponge overflows, and that overflow is what damages your blood vessels, your nerves, and all of your organs essentially. This is why muscle mass is one of the strongest protective factors against metabolic disease. There's compelling research showing that every 10% increase in muscle mass is linked to significantly lower insulin resistance and lower diabetes risk. And this isn't about aesthetics or athletic performance. This is about fundamental metabolic health. When you build muscle, you're building glucose storage capacity. You're giving your body more room to handle the food that you eat without spiking insulin chronically. Now, what's particularly important here is that this works independent of body weight. You can have 2 people at the same weight, but the person with more muscle and less fat will have dramatically better blood sugar control. Muscle is metabolically active tissue that helps regulate your entire energy system. Now, blood sugar control is only part of the picture because muscle doesn't just store energy. It determines how flexibly your entire metabolism works. Muscle keeps your metabolic system adaptable. And this concept of metabolic flexibility is crucial for long-term health. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch between burning carbohydrates and burning fat depending on what's available and what you're doing at the time. Muscle tissue is packed with mitochondria. These are the powerhouses of your cells that generate energy. When you have more muscle, you have more mitochondria, and that increases your capacity for fat oxidation. You become better at burning stored fat for fuel. People with low muscle mass lose this flexibility. They become locked into sugar-burning mode, constantly dependent on frequent meals and carbohydrates to maintain their energy. A flexible metabolism is like a hybrid car that switches fuel automatically. Low muscle turns you into an old petrol engine that wastes energy. When your metabolism is flexible, you can skip a meal without crashing. You can exercise when you're fasted. You can go several hours between eating without feeling irritable or foggy. Now, that's the sign of a well-functioning metabolic system. This also ties into longevity at a cellular level. Mitochondrial function declines with age, and that decline is associated with almost every age-related disease, from cardiovascular disease to neurodegeneration. Resistance training and maintaining muscle mass is one of the most effective ways to preserve mitochondrial health. You're essentially keeping your cellular engines running efficiently, which translates to better energy, better recovery, and better overall function as you age. But metabolic health isn't the most immediate danger of muscle loss. In real life, especially in emergency medicine, the most devastating consequence is far more sudden. Hip fractures, which obviously are almost always caused by falls, have a 20 to 30% one-year mortality rate. That means if you're elderly and you break your hip, there's up to a 1 in 3 chance that you won't survive the year. Even if you do survive, many people never regain their independence. They move from hospital to rehab to a nursing home, and they never go back to living on their own. A strong legs and a strong core are protective armor against this. When you have good quad strength, good glute strength, good balance, you can catch yourself. You can recover from a stumble that would otherwise put someone else on the ground. Your muscles are shock absorbers. When they're weak, even a small trip becomes a major injury. What's particularly tragic about this is how preventable it is. Someone with strong quads and glutes can stumble and recover. Someone with sarcopenia goes down hard. The difference between independence and disability in your 70s often comes down to whether you've maintained your leg strength in your 50s and 60s. Now, falling also creates a vicious cycle. After a fall, people become afraid of falling. They become anxious, so they move less. Moving less accelerates muscle loss, which increases your risk of falls even further. Breaking that cycle requires intentional strength training and movement practice, which is why resistance training becomes more important, not less important, as you age. Okay, so because falls and weakness are so closely linked, researchers have looked for simple ways to measure strength, and one metric stands out far more than almost any other. Grip strength is one of the strongest mortality markers that we measure in clinical research, and it's surprisingly simple to assess. You squeeze a device called a dynamometer, and that single measurement correlates remarkably well with total body strength and overall health. A lower grip strength predicts high rates of heart attack, of stroke, and early death across multiple large population studies. In fact, it's so reliable that many researchers now consider it a vital sign, as important as blood pressure or heart rate. If your grip is weak, your legs are probably weak, your core is probably weak, your overall muscle mass is probably low. Grip strength is like a battery indicator for your whole body. When it's low, the system is running flat. A decline in grip strength is often one of the earliest measurable signs of functional decline, showing up years before people develop obvious disability. Importantly, grip strength isn't just a marker, it's also modifiable. Training your grip strength through exercises like farmer carries, like dead hangs, and grip-specific tools improve not just your grip strength, but your overall upper body strength and your functional capacity. Now, strength doesn't just protect your body from physical decline, it also plays a critical role in protecting the organ that people fear losing the most, which is the brain. Muscle isn't just physical. It affects your brain in profound ways that we're only beginning to fully understand. One of the most important mechanisms is through brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which I've mentioned many times before. Strength training increases BDNF levels significantly. More BDNF means stronger neural connections. It means better memory, improved learning capacity. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain cells. Strength training spreads it generously. This isn't a minor effect. The increase in BDNF from resistance training is comparable to what you see with aerobic exercise, which has been studied far more extensively for brain health. Beyond BDNF, muscle helps to regulate systemic inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation is increasingly recognized as a driver of cognitive decline and dementia. Muscle tissue secretes anti-inflammatory compounds called myowins when it contracts. Now, these myowins help keep inflammation in check throughout your body, including in your brain. And there's also emerging evidence that people with higher muscle mass in midlife have lower rates of dementia decades later. Now, the mechanism probably involves multiple pathways involving better glucose control, reduced inflammation, improved blood flow, higher BDNF. But the overall message is clear. Building and maintaining muscle is a form of cognitive insurance. What's really encouraging here is that these benefits occur regardless of when you start. Older adults who begin resistance training show measurable improvements in cognitive function within weeks to months. You're not just preserving the brain you have, you're actively improving its capacity to form new connections and resist age-related decline. So if muscle influences longevity, your metabolism, your mobility, your cognition, then the obvious next question is whether it's ever too late to start. And as I just hinted, the answer is a clear no. The most important message here is that it's never too late to build strength. Muscle responds to progressive overload at any age. Even people in their 80s and 90s can gain significant muscle mass and strength with appropriate training. Now, progressive overload simply means gradually increasing the challenge. More weight, more reps, more speed over time. Your muscles adapt to stress, so if you consistently ask them to do slightly more than they're used to, they get stronger. And this principle works whether you're 20 or 80 or 100. Protein intake becomes increasingly important as you age. You should aim for roughly 1.2 to 1.6 g of protein per kilo of body weight per day, or even higher if you're older or very active. Protein provides the building blocks for muscle tissue, and older adults are less efficient at using protein to build muscle, which means you need more to achieve the same effect. Focus on training your big muscle groups, your legs, your glutes, your back, your chest. These are the muscles that matter most for functional independence and metabolic health. Exercises like squats, deadlifts, rows, and presses give you the most return on your investment. You don't need complicated programs or hours in the gym. Just 2 to 3 strength sessions per week is enough for major gains, especially if you're starting from a low baseline. Now, walking combined with lifting is one of the most powerful longevity combinations available. Walking maintains cardiovascular fitness and promotes general movement throughout the day. Resistance training builds the muscle mass and the strength that protect against falls, against metabolic disease and functional decline. So together they cover almost all the bases for healthy aging. Building muscle really is like compound interest. The earlier you start, the bigger the payoff, but even small deposits later in life, they can still grow. As I always say, consistency matters far more than intensity. A modest program followed for years will always beat an aggressive program you quit after 3 months. Now, all of this science only matters if it translates into something practical, something you can actually fit into real life. A simple routine makes the science real, and the best routine is one that you'll actually follow. So let me give you a realistic framework that fits into normal life. Daily movement should be non-negotiable. Brisk walking for at least 30 minutes, or taking the stairs wherever possible, and even practicing getting up from the floor without using your hands. That last one is both a test and an exercise. If you can get down on the floor and back up without assistance, you have good functional strength and good mobility. If you can't, then that's a priority to work on. 3 times a week, do 15 to 25 minutes of focused strength training. Now, this can be bodyweight exercises at home. It can be squats, push-ups, lunges, planks. It can be dumbbells or kettlebells. It can be even machines at the gym if you have a membership at one. The specific method matters far less than the consistency and the progressive nature of the training. You should be challenging yourself enough that the last few reps of each set feel pretty difficult. Include grip training, specifically farmer carries, walking while holding heavy weights in each hand. These are exceptional for grip strength and your core stability. Dead hangs from a pull-up bar build your grip strength endurance massively. Hand grippers are inexpensive tools that most people can get on the internet, and you can use them while you're watching TV. These exercises also improve your shoulder health and upper body function generally. Now, you should be prioritizing protein with each meal. A palm-sized portion of protein-rich food, whether that's meats, fish, eggs, dairy, beans, Having these at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner ensures that you're hitting your daily target without having to think about whey protein or supplements or needing to calculate everything precisely. Now, this is sustainable, and sustainability is the real longevity hack. You don't need to be perfect, you need to be consistent. The person who does 3 decent strength sessions every week for 10 years will be far stronger and healthier than the person who trains intensely for just a few months and then stops. When you zoom out, everything in this video points to the same conclusion. Muscle isn't about looking good, it's about living longer. It's about staying independent, preventing disease, and keeping your brain sharp. It's the closest thing that we have to a true longevity organ. Every major health outcome improves with higher muscle mass and more strength. Metabolic health, cardiovascular health, cognitive function, fall prevention, immune function, recovery from illness or surgery, all of these are better when you're stronger. And unlike many aspects of health that decline inevitably with age, muscle is largely under your control. The patients I see in the emergency department who maintain their independence into their 80s and 90s aren't genetically special. They are just strong. They've maintained their muscle mass through consistent movement and resistance training. They can recover from illness because their bodies have reserves. They don't fall, or when they do fall, they don't break. Strength is built slowly, but the benefits compound for the rest of your life. Start where you are. If you haven't trained in years, then that is okay. Your muscles are waiting to respond. Now, if you're already strong, the goal is maintenance and gradual progression. Either way, the investment that you make in your muscle today is an investment in your independence, your health span, and your lifespan decades from now.